What's up, witches? You're listening to the Bewitching Hour. I'm your host, Kat, and I'll be dropping exciting episodes covering everything from the history of witchcraft, aliens, the paranormal, ghost stories, and I'm excited to have guests on who have a story to tell, as well as share my experiences and perspective on living life as a modern-day witch. Grab your brooms, because it's about to get real. Hey guys! I'm so excited for you to hear this episode. I'm joined by my little brother Liam, who lives in New York City, and he is a drag queen. So this episode is super interesting to me. We kind of talk about our background, how we grew up as kids, our childhood, things like that, and how it kind of shaped us into who we are today and why we practice our beliefs. We are going to get into ghost stories. We're going to get into how he got into drag and like why it is so important. And he kind of actually explains in a more articulate way of what drag means and why people are so judgmental against it and how they shouldn't be judgmental. And then, we just talk about a lot of different things. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear this. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, brava.
Hello.
Thanks for doing this with me finally.
I know, I'm so excited. It's been such a process getting any time off to do this.
Oh no, I know you're busy. But I'm really excited to have you as a guest because I feel like you probably know me better than anyone else in my life, and you can definitely validate my background and my gifts and all that jazz. So
I mean, I do remember when you were like 11 and would carry around a stuffed cat like all day. So
it was a black cat too.
Right. Boots,
yes. Yeah, I actually got her in Salem.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did. But since we were little, we have both always kind of been into very different things than most children. Like Halloween was a real big deal in our house. Mom wasn't really the most religious. I mean, how do you remember our childhood?
I mean, I think I remember her always being like sort of spiritual and like,
oh yeah,
open, like very willing to like she describes herself as a Buddha Palian.
Yeah.
Which is like, she likes reincarnation and she believes in that, but there's sort of like some of the more Christian beliefs in there. But like we didn't go to church.
I do remember we did go to church. There was a Catholic church that our dad tried to take us to, and I wore
Catholic.
a red top. Yeah, or maybe it was Episcopal. I can't remember. Anyway, I wore this outfit. It was a red top and black bottoms, and I had my hair in like these cute little like twisty buns. And I remember one of the girls in my Sunday school class was like, "Those are the devil's colors." And I got real upset.
That's hot.
So I was like probably 7 or 8. And I mean, even then, religion bothered me because, I mean, I just remember being traumatized in my Sunday school class again by what we were learning. We were learning about like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I swear to God, I heard them say Dead Sea Squirrels and I had a complete meltdown.
Oh.
So yeah, since we were little, religion has been a big issue for me. Being a witch for me isn't really about like worshiping anything at all. It's just about getting away from the societal norms and being able to think freely and for myself.
But what about, so I remember like when you were going through sort of some rough times that you turned to a more like Christian basic belief system. Like what was that about?
I did try the church for quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And actually they kind of turned their backs on me. And so that's kind of what put the taste in my mouth that, maybe this isn't really for me, because I was actually volunteering at a church and it was a non-denominational church. Like I had known the pastor since I was 15. All the people that I went to church with, grew up around, knew them, was comfortable. And it was a great experience. It was a very positive experience. It really did get me through that phase of my life, but I still never felt like I was being true to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And once I started coming to New York and hanging out with you and being kind of in like the drag queen scene and, obviously posting pictures and things like that, they actually asked me to step down from volunteering because they said that it
Wow.
didn't align with what the church believed.
Well, I mean, they're not wrong, you know, if that's their belief system that they're preaching, then that definitely doesn't fall in line with
Right, but they also
people's beliefs.
preached a whole lot of like, welcome home. There's no judgment here. I felt very judged.
Well, I mean, that's sort of the classic, though, thing, the idea of like humans, it's our nature to turn to something of comfort when, you know, we're going in a bad direction or we are going through a difficult time. Like it's very easy to slip back into something that we can blame or rely on or have faith in to sort of distract us from the real world reality that we're dealing with, you know?
And I honestly, I didn't really fully dive deep into like the witchy aspect until I read The Law of Attraction
Hmm.
and learned more about manifesting. Proved to myself that I could manifest, and I was actually really good at it. Because a lot of crazy things have happened to me. I've met a lot of people that I never thought would have ever come into my life, and
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
it just
I
kind of
mean,
again validated that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
well, I mean, it's the power of the secret and putting out into the universe what you want and what you need, and usually it reciprocates and gives it to you if you work hard enough at it. I mean, the people who are famous, for example, are usually the people who stuck with it and have stuck to their guns and
Right.
like kept going, you know, against all odds and no matter what, and you know, kept saying to themselves like, "This is going to happen. I'm going to work for this." It's not a so much, to me at least, this part is not so much a spiritual thing as it is a sort of like inertia
Just like
thing.
a
It's
way
like,
of life, really.
yeah, it's like if you
A
push
movement.
yourself hard enough, like you are the one actually doing the work, even though
Exactly.
it doesn't feel like you are. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the people who stick with it and keep going with things that are difficult are the ones that are successful because they're not allowing the strain to get in the way of their progress.
Right. And I still very much so believe in like deities. I love the saints. I'm actually wearing a Mary Magdalene medallion right now because she is the
The
patron
junkie
saint.
whore.
She's not a whore. She's very misunderstood. Um,
Okay.
she is the patron saint of women, and they're kind of the original feminist.
Okay. Yeah. Uh huh.
So I look to her for inspiration. I mean, I could go on and on about the saints and why I feel the way I do about that, because they do speak to you and they do show up for you when you need it.
Well, I heard something recently that you know, an angel will not present itself to you. Well, you know, whatever that means to anybody, will not present itself to you unless you ask for it, unless you actually finally sit down and say, "Okay, I need help."
Right, because they're never going to be forceful. That's the beauty of that
Hmm.
side of, I don't even want to call it religion, just that side of spiritualism, because like with the church, it's always forced on you, no matter what.
Well, yeah, that is sort of what that was my issue with it growing up, and I always felt so uncomfortable in that environment, even, you know, just sitting in a group, you know, like the kids would sit in the circle and the leader would talk about things and make us sing songs about Jesus and stuff. And I, you know, I think that that's sweet and that's nice for some people, but for me, I just always felt like, is anyone, am I the only one who sees this? Am I the only one who's like, what are we doing?
Well, it's
You
almost like
know,
conditioning. I'm not trying to like shit on anybody
yes.
that believes in what they believe. Like I respect
Well,
everyone's beliefs, but this is just like my personal take on it.
that's sort of what it was. It was like, and I've always had an issue in general with like authority and somebody saying this is how it is. I always question it. I'm always like, but why? And why do you know you're right? And you know, just because you're an adult doesn't mean you have it all figured out. So why should I listen to this thing that to me doesn't make sense, but yet I should just blindly follow you because you are in a position of power in some way, even among, you know, a youth pastor among kids.
Right.
I always was sort of like, what? But what's behind the curtain? What are we not? What are we not seeing? And also, are we sort of being trained to play a part that we think that we have to? Because I think that's a big issue with a lot of religions is sort of like this very like preacher like mentality of, in even other situations like at work or at school, they sort of like turn on this thing where they're like, but you know Jesus did this, and you know, oh, you're talking about science, but you guys know that Jesus did that, and God, and it's just sort of like, where is your where's your truth? Where's your like real humanity?
Right. Like, do you actually believe it, or are you just repeating it because it's been told to you 50,000 times throughout your life?
Well, and because you feel that you have to in order
Mm.
to get something or gain something, or even as a comfort, even as a um, okay, as long as I say this and recite this exactly as it is, then I'm going to be saved, and when I die, everything's going to be fine, right? Like, oh, and my problems will be solved, and I'll get a good job because Jesus will help me, and it's not always false, I don't think, but I think it's again going back to that idea of like the secret and putting
Right.
things out
I was
to the
just going to
universe.
say, I think manifestation can kind of be wrapped up into that also.
Absolutely, yeah. This I read this article the other day, and it made me so like violently uncomfortable with what the situation was. So basically, this couple, um, they got married, and it was their wedding day this happened, and they planned this big surprise, and they had a helicopter come, and they got in the helicopter, and they took off from their wedding, and it was supposed to be kind of this grand show for everybody, and the helicopter crashed, and they died, both of them, on their wedding day.
Which is so tragic.
No, it's horrible. I mean, it's really, really sad. But what made me uncomfortable was the response of one of their friends who posted on Facebook, I'm so sorry this happened, but how awesome is it that you guys get to spend your honeymoon with Jesus? And I was like, okay, that is so inappropriate. When are we going to be able to stand up and say like that's wrong? Like, I'm glad you're a Christian. I'm glad that maybe comforts you to say, but that is so inappropriate at this time, and is not actually doing anything other than you sort of obnoxiously expressing your Christianity at a time that doesn't make sense.
Well, and
Like
it's kind of taken away from the tragedy, so it's a little bit narcissistic.
or no, it totally is narcissistic and also very like cult like
Oh,
mentality.
fully. And
Which,
also, like, what if they weren't good people, like, quote unquote, good people to someone that is a Christian? Like, what if they just did terrible things? And so, they were deemed by the Christian religion, whatever, that they were going to hell. So, who's to say that
well,
they weren't spending their honeymoon with Satan, you know?
well, right, right. No, I mean they very well could be taking the elevator down, but uh, I think that that's sort of the issue that I have with a lot of organized religion in general, and like specifically Christianity, because that's what I've experienced. Is that they sort of have these rules set in place that when you think about, you're like, but that doesn't add up. What's not computing here? Because for example, you can do all of these things to be saved, yet there's certain things that will condemn you forever. And
Right.
then there's a way to repent and then be saved again. So it's sort of like, well,
It's just a
can you,
never ending cycle of, and it's almost like an excuse, like, oh, I'm going to go do this shitty thing, but I'll be fine because I can repent.
right? It's like I can do whatever I want as long as I have Jesus in my heart. And it's like, okay, but isn't
But
the
if
whole point of religion to make you live your life as a better human?
Exactly. I was just going to say that. If Jesus is truly in your heart, would you then be compelled to do shitty things?
Right. What is your actual motive here? And
Yep.
and what is the character that you're putting on right now? Because it doesn't seem authentic,
Yeah. And there's
you know?
just so much judgment. Like, I remember I brought in high school one of my gay friends to church with me. And I
Mhm.
remember a lady specifically coming up to us and being like, Jesus doesn't approve of that. And we were just like, okay. And I straight up told our parents, I was like, I'm never going back there again. Please don't ever make me.
I love that stuff. I think that's fantastic. I do. I'm just sort of like in of this mentality of like it's just sort of comical that they think that is going to somehow change people's minds or
I
affect
know.
them. It's sort of like if you are comfortable and happy as yourself, what none of those things actually make a difference, you know,
Right.
in your life, and they're not going to change who you are. They're not going to. I mean, even gay conversion therapy, that doesn't work.
Gay conversion therapy to me is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Like you're literally forcing somebody to not live their authentic life as themselves.
Right. Yeah. It's very controversial, obviously. It's very difficult. And there's still a lot of people who practice it and who believe in it.
It's funny that you said earlier, take that elevator down, because it totally reminds me of the Kirstie Alley movie, the Tooth Fairy, I think is what it's
Toothless.
called, Toothless.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I think we both can agree that that image will be forever burned in our brains when they're playing like the funeral music, and it's like
Oh, are
her
you serious?
going straight
That
down to hell.
the legendary fat actress herself, Kirstie Alley, in an elevator with fire burning around her, and she's screaming as it just descends down into, you know, eternal suffering. That's iconic.
But also
Are you kidding?
terrifying.
Well, yeah, when you're like 6, which we were like around the or I was when we saw that movie. But I mean, that has even to the point that, can I tell you about my dream that I had?
Yes, but let me just say one thing real quick, just to
Okay. Oh,
prove how early I have started this whole manifestation journey. I actually lost a tooth during that movie.
you did?
I did, and it totally freaked mom out.
Did you push it out yourself?
No, it was already loose. Like I knew it was going to come out eventually, but I just like lost it the same night that we rented that movie. And you know,
Huh.
mom does not deal with teeth, so she was like, "You handle this." So I just pulled it out, and I was like, "Okay, well, there it is." During that movie, which is kind of weird.
That's true. I mean, but she always was really good about putting money under our pillow, which is cute.
Yeah. Okay, so what was
That's
your dream? Sorry.
Oh, okay. So my dream. So it's speaking of hell. I basically imagined in the dream what hell was, and it wasn't like what everyone thinks of. I mean, we always think of like the fire and brimstone and whatever, that sort of image, that's sort of burned into our psyches at a young age. But this was completely different. So it started sort of in, uh, if you could imagine, like high up in an office building in a major city, except no one was there. It was all blank, and you were just staring at, in front of you, an elevator. To the left of it was like a little seating area, and there were like two plants right next to the elevator. So you would go in, and it took you all the way down, and you could just tell that you were going like below ground, like you were just kept going. And it opened to these corridors of, um, everything was metal, all the walls, the floors, everything. And there were just all these rooms sectioned off from the metal, the corridor. And you would get put into this room with like 4 to 5 other people, except it was a super small room. There was only room for a couch that you would sit on, and then like maybe a foot of space in front of you, and then there was a clock on the wall. And basically, I just remember being in it and just like feeling so much pain, and feeling like more agony than I've ever felt. And there was specifically, they would put dogs in front of you,
Oh.
and it would be a really angry, aggressive dog, and you would have to look at it in the face and slowly inch your face towards it, until it bit you, and you would have to do that over and over and over again. And then I just remember the last thing that was, I think, the most like chilling about this was that, I remember that the clock was in there. And I remember being in there for days. Like I was in there for like 3 days in the dream, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And then I looked at the clock, and 1 minute had passed.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it was just like, but I just think that's so interesting. Like I don't know why I would have had that dream or thought about that, but um, the different incarnations of hell, or what that could mean to someone, I think is really interesting.
I don't know how to like interpret that. Did you like try looking it up or anything?
No, I didn't. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what would the explanation be for imagining your own hell? I mean,
I mean, honestly, I don't know, but I had a really weird dream last night too. And I don't even know how this makes sense or pertains to anything whatsoever. But I had a dream that I was like kind of out in the middle of the woods, and I was like living in this cottage type house. And there was a garden that I had started, like I don't know, there was like herbs and all that stuff, which is kind of aligned with what I'm doing right now with like practicing the Green Witch lifestyle.
uh-huh.
Um, so something, a spirit, a being, something told me to throw cotton on my garden. So I sat there for like hours just picking apart cotton balls and throwing it on my garden until it looked like there were spider webs all over the garden. And then I just woke up.
Oh, that's weird.
I know. I don't know what that
Okay.
means. I tried to look it up, but it didn't really give me much information.
Put cotton balls. What would that even?
Well, no, it not specifically cotton balls. That was just like all I had. It just said
Oh,
cotton. Yeah, throw cotton on your garden. I was like, okay. Hmm.
oh, like the plant.
Right, but all I had was the cotton balls.
I don't know what that could be either. I really don't. Maybe it's that you're sort of unsure about where to begin, and so you sort of have to revert back to something you're familiar with.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like cotton is in our everyday life. Like we wear cotton. We like
Use
cotton
it to
balls.
wash my face, like my makeup off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like very accessible. Maybe it's sort of like the idea that you're so new to this, or you're sort of figuring out where you stand, that you need to start very familiar. I don't know.
Right. And also, I kind of can appreciate the fact that cotton is a natural resource. A garden is a natural thing that I created. So it kind of like tied together, but still don't really understand the meaning.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, that's really my only idea of what it could be, but I'm sure it could mean a million different things. I mean, what do they say? Um, that dreams are either sort of the like psychological ramblings of your inner subconscious that are being just strewn together to try to like make some sense of it
Mm-hmm.
again. Um, I mean, that to me is like it could come from anywhere. It could.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to have to look like real deep into it eventually.
Mhm.
So, okay, let's talk about the East Coast and the magic of the East Coast and how that has kind of shaped you. Our parents split up when we were young. So, you and I
Mhm.
really relied on each other to get through those things. But we also had very different upbringings. So
Yeah.
I lived with dad, you lived with mom. I did
Uh-huh.
spend, quite a while in Connecticut. So I really connect with the East Coast. I call that home. Texas has never felt
Well,
like home to me.
the fact that you feel so connected to a place that um, you've spent like percentage wise at least so much less more time than where you live now.
Well, and the thing is, like, whenever dad lived in Canada and we took our drive from Canada back to Texas, we stopped at, all of the touristy East Coast sites on the way. So when we went to Maine, we got to see Stephen King's house in Bangor, and he was like right outside. He was playing with his dog when we showed up, and his house was very
Really?
cool. Yeah, we got a picture of it. Well, of the house. He wasn't outside at the time, but yeah, he's playing with his dog. Saw that we had driven up, and mom wanted to show her, I think it was her thesis that she wrote about him. She wanted to give it to him because she's such a Stephen King fan. So I've always grown up like loving Stephen King as well. Like I said, she wanted to give him her thesis, and he ran inside as soon as he saw us come up.
Well, I'm
So,
sure some white lady with a book being like, please
right,
read this. I mean,
right. I'm sure he gets it all the time. And I know that he's like a very private person to begin with, which is, probably why he's a writer. Most writers are kind of secluded in that way.
I mean, let's be real. He has to have some fucked up ass shit in his repertoire to write the things that he does.
I know. I really would love for him to write an autobiography.
I mean, the thing is, I'm sure it would just be like, I had a great childhood. Had a nice family. It's sort of like you have to, it's the inner workings of their
Like his inner
psyche.
demons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe
Like it's
those
not
have
even,
manifested into what have become, best selling books. Because he's
well,
very, very successful as a writer.
yeah. I mean, sometimes the worst, you know, drug addicts and serial killers and whatever of society have perfectly normal lives.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But I don't
that,
remember this. I don't remember this.
well, you were
I don't,
younger. I mean, you were little. I was 9. So you would have been 4.
3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so that was one of the stops. And then we stopped in Salem, Massachusetts, which is where I felt myself come alive. Even at 9 years old, I was like, mom had bought me this book about, I don't want to like miss say her name, but I think it's Tituba. She was
Yeah.
the black
Tituba,
slave. Yeah.
bitch, she originated voodoo witchcraft shit. I mean, that's where they like literally the Salem witch trials started was with her because they believed that she had brought over black magic from Africa, which
Right.
is like, well, sis, let me break this down for you. She didn't bring it over. Well, no, you brought her over, dear. Like you kidnapped her
Yeah,
and
you
then
took her
decided.
out of her home,
Mhm.
away from everything that she ever knew, placed her in a new thing. Of course, I would have acted out too.
Well, the thing is, I don't even know what prompted it. Was that the white girls were acting crazy and they needed to figure out why. And so they were like, I'm sure it's the black lady. So, they were like, well, obviously she must be a witch. That's why, because they were dancing naked in around the fires and, or acting out in very aggressive or like, in sporadic ways that they weren't normally seen. And so they needed, this is kind of like what we were talking about earlier. They needed to figure out what was the cause, or like,
But also, these girls were, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, from like the age range of like 9 years old to teenage years. So
yeah,
of
they were.
course they're coming up on like puberty. They're coming up on coming into their own womanhood. Of course, there's gonna be times where they're gonna act a little crazy.
Well, I mean, when I went through puberty, I didn't dance naked in the woods, but
I mean, if I had the
um,
chance, I probably would have.
I'm sure that that's accurate.
Actually, I think I do remember being naked quite a bit when I was younger.
But I remember too reading that they have a theory that even because they talk about that it was sort of it was a cultural or social sort of abnormality or something that caused them to act out. But another theory is that they were eating bread, I believe, that was moldy,
Oh,
or
so they
some
could have
food.
some fungus type thing could have
Yes, it
attacked their brains.
yes, it was, well, it was sort of more of like the effects of like LSD. So it was causing them to see things that weren't happening, or have and have the hallucinations. Um
But also, with that being said, psychedelics do thin that veil and connect you closer to the spirit world. So that makes sense also.
yeah, I mean, I've never done drugs, so I don't really know what
I'm
they.
just saying, like, I just know that that could be a possibility.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I read that book, pretty much that whole trip. So by the time we got to Salem, I already felt connected and was super interested. Every school paper that I had, I always did, the history of the Salem witch trials or witchcraft or something. Like my teachers all thought I was crazy. So when we finally got to Salem and we got to go to the Salem Witch Museum and just like being in that town, you just feel it. But at least I did. It really just like sparked something in me. And I remember buying a mood ring at the Salem Witch Museum. And then
Mhm.
once we left Massachusetts, we ended up eventually in Tennessee, and the mood ring fell off my finger and went down a storm drain. Which, what are the odds of that happening?
Well, I mean, there is definitely like sort of an energy shift when you go to Salem. At least I
It's not
think,
even
because
just
I'm very.
Salem; it's the whole East Coast for me. Like every time I come back to
Oh,
Connecticut,
okay.
I feel it.
Well, I mean, I would consider myself very sensitive to energies like that, and sort of an example of that, for instance, would be when mom and I went to the Eastern State Penitentiary, and which is a prison
Hmm.
uh, that had since shut down and become a museum, or like a tourist attraction, basically. Um, and when you I think you walk down the steps and sort of through this little corridor. As soon as you enter the actual prison, there's like this wave, like it hits you so hard, and it is like dark, negative, ugly, evil energy, and it's a total shift from where you just were, 20 feet outside.
Oh, I
So
believe it. I mean,
I think.
whenever we were there for your graduation and we went to, is it Newgate? Is that what it's called?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we went to the Newgate site where the old prison is, and it's been shut down for decades. Um, you could definitely feel a very intense and like kind of almost sad energy.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because we are all just beings or entities of energy, and so is everything around us. So are the plants and the animals and the air and everything. We're all made up of essentially the same thing. So when you think about and energy being there at some point and leaving it behind, even though the physical entity is not there. That makes actually a lot of sense.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So
Because,
this is crazy. You know how I went to New Orleans in October.
uh-huh.
So when we were on our way there, Woody, my friend, was pointing out, kind of staple places, and she was showing me the prison that's there. And it doesn't really look like a prison. It kind of looks like an office building, but she was saying that during Hurricane Katrina, they just kind of abandoned all the prisoners, and a lot of people died because the prison flooded. And so
I
I think
didn't
up
know
until the
that.
second floor. Yeah. So there was like prisoners trapped in their cells. Like the guards just pieced out and left all those prisoners there. So once the water started rising, they obviously drowned.
Is that true?
Yes,
Really?
and they left them there for days. And she said that whenever they finally were able to get to the prison to get the remaining people out, they just had them shackled like across the highway.
Whoa.
Isn't that intense? So like talk about a very high energy and very sad energy place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, that's just going back to sort of human nature of fleeing when things get difficult. I mean, so many people left their animals caged up and just, beat it out of town.
Yeah, and I remember being in New Orleans right after Hurricane Katrina. I went when I was 16 with our grandpa, and we went to the Ninth Ward, which is the place that got hit the hardest. And the X's were still on the doors with the number of bodies that were still
Yeah.
inside. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was
And
crazy.
well, there's still not, I mean, this many years later, I don't know exactly how many years it's been, but it's still not rebuilt. It's still just devastated and destroyed in so many areas.
So to kind of bring it back to the magic of the East Coast, how do you feel like it shaped you? Just
Well,
growing up in Connecticut and being in a completely, because it's a very different world from Texas.
Well, I think that being in a city versus more of a rural area is obviously a very different upbringing and changes your perspective on a lot of things. Even just down to the idea that you can't really rely on that many people when you're in the rural area because you are effectively alone. I mean, when you live in a city or a more urban area, you have people around you 24/7. You have next door neighbors that know you or keep up with you a lot, and they know, the ins and outs of your life sometimes. But when you live somewhere like we lived, which was kind of in the middle of the woods, we did have neighbors, but they weren't close. They weren't, walk next door and get some sugar kind of thing.
Right.
Um, you kind of have to go inward a lot and spend a lot of time alone. And I think that that just, in general, leads to a lot of introspection and self reflection that can really change who you are as a person. When you're not inundated with noise and stimuli and activities and things, and you kind of have to sit within nature and be more solitary than maybe you're used to, it definitely changes your perspective.
I could definitely see that. And so now living in New York, do you feel like growing up in that sort of environment has made you, because you are a drag queen in New York City, do you think that
I
that kind of
am.
do you think that that kind of helped you feel more comfortable
Yeah.
living
Oh my
as
God.
your authentic self?
Oh, you mean that idea of, like self-reflection?
Yeah. Like were you, because I feel like you were able to find yourself at a much younger age than I was. Or at least not that I didn't find myself, I just was uncomfortable with being my authentic self because I did grow up in Texas, and I was around the church a lot, and I was just always so terrified of being judged.
Yeah, no, and I definitely was as well, and I think, most people are. It's not an uncommon fear. I think that I took the idea of being alone and what you can do with that energy and power with me to New York, and that definitely has stayed with me even this many years later. I mean, I still love being alone probably more than anything because I am able to go inward and dig up a lot of things that when you're distracted all the time that you don't really reach. As far as finding myself, I mean that's a tricky one because I think that I'm a very open person, and so I wasn't ready really to identify as like anything for a very long time because I was just sort of like, well, there's so many possibilities and I don't really know what this is or what I am or who I am or what I want to be or what I'm willing to be. And so I was really sort of like an open book, like a blank slate, a sponge, whatever, taking in kind of everything that was around me. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
No, it fully does. So I know that when I, found out, or, you had told me finally.
Girl, I didn't tell you. My friend ratted my ass out. She called you or texted you or something and was like, "You really should be asking him what he's doing." And then I think sent you photos, right?
I think so. God, that was such a long time ago though. And honestly, I didn't care. It
Of
didn't
course you
it
didn't
didn't
care. And
change anything for me.
I knew that it wouldn't. I wasn't worried about that, but I didn't have the control over when and how
Right.
the
Which is
conversation went.
absolutely, you are validated in that. Like any sort of thing like that where you make a big decision about how you're going to live your life and how you're going to represent yourself, it should absolutely be your truth and no one
Well, because
else's.
you need to be able to articulate where it's coming from
Right.
and why you feel that you have the power to do something like that. Because uh and it could be anything. It could be, that you decide you want to go to medical school or be a lawyer or whatever. I mean, you do whatever. But when it's something that is societally people
Unaccepted, unfortunately.
well, it is
It's
and
getting
it
there.
isn't.
It's getting
It's
there.
getting there,
There's a movement. Yeah.
but it's more so that people don't understand it. And then that I think leads to people not tolerating it or accepting it because they don't get what it is. They look at it and they're very confused because they see something that they have been told their whole lives is unnatural or not, the way that things are supposed to be. You get assigned the blue color or the pink color, and then everything that comes after that is set because of that. Like you grow up as a boy, you have sports toys and trucks, and your room is painted blue, and you grow up and you are expected to play soccer and play football and do all of this. And when somebody changes the game and shifts it and says, well, but I'm not gonna do that, I'm gonna go off and do this thing, people are like, what do you mean? Wait, you can't do that, but this is how it's supposed to be, this is how we all know it. And people are very afraid of change in that way because again they don't understand it fully.
Right.
A lot of people don't get it because they see something that looks to them like a woman, right? And they of course when it is very big and has a deep voice and wide shoulders, they sort of can see whatever the man underneath that, if you will. And it really really messes with their minds. It really throws off their senses and what is normal.
Which is sad because to me, I've always viewed it as an art form.
Well, exactly, and that's how I view it. And
And of course, there are, you know, the cases of the trans people that do want to make that change, which is 100% fine with me. Again, I think everyone should live their life as their true authentic self. So if that's what you want to do and it makes you happy and you feel loved and you feel comfortable being who you are, then go for it.
well, because at the end of the day, being a drag queen is more accepted than being a trans woman because at the end of the day, you take everything off and then you walk
Right.
outside and you're a man again and you have a certain level of privilege from doing that. Whereas, being a trans woman, you are that identity 24/7. And that can be very dangerous and scary for a lot of people. And so I think that they sort of use drag as a way to test the waters and see what it's going to be like, see how people will react to them in the state that they really want to be in. A lot of times you do very heightened femininity drag as opposed to more of the artful stuff. I'm not saying that's not out there. Of course it is. And of course, trans women still do drag and will, be very artful about it. But I'm just saying, with my case, it's just painting, it's just styling, it's just art and imagery and references and all of that.
And it's a form of expressing yourself. It's your creativity manifesting through your body.
Right. I mean, when I sit down to paint my face, I can do whatever I want. It is
Yeah,
it is
you are your own canvas. It'd be the same thing as if you were to paint a canvas from Hobby Lobby.
It is, but it's better because it's on yourself. It's your body. It's your
Right.
own expression that you get to wear and embrace. And I think that that's very different from a lot of forms of art and is really remarkable when you think about it because in what job or what career do you get to try on all of these identities and these masks and this makeup and this whatever besides drag and really, being an actor, if you
Right.
will.
I was going to say
Um,
theater.
Theater, right? I mean, which is it's all theater at the end of the day. And I would further go to say that all jobs are a form of theater because you put on your uniform, you put on your drag, and you go to work and you are the embodiment of what that thing is supposed to be. You put on a doctor's coat and you talk to your patients how society is set up that doctors are supposed to talk and they scribble on their pad and they do this and they do that. And really what drag is mocking the idea of identity. Why do you look at somebody in pink and with a big wig and earrings and be like, oh, that's a woman? Like, why does that equal woman? Why does heels equal woman? Why is this super heightened sort of clownish femininity? People are like, oh, that's a woman. It's a
But
really complex and really multifaceted community and art form that I don't think gets a lot of enough credit, at least in the vein of sociocultural change and documentation and, talking about it.
all that being said, was it shocking to you when I told you my truth about my beliefs?
No, oh my God, not at all. I remember that you were always very sensitive to things like, energies and things that we've already talked about. I know that you used to see things
Mm-hmm.
a lot, as do I. I mean, I experience that all the time as well. And I also remember that you sort of had this proclivity towards the darkness. Just I think it's really interesting that you had this fascination with things that were I don't quite know how to put it other than like the darkness. Even though it sounds negative, it's not. It's more just like the things that are not explored as often or that people aren't always ready to hear or talk about.
Yeah, so like early metaphysics, really.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, what do you really define as metaphysics?
Um, Pretty much for me, practicing green witchery, it's a connection to nature. It's my oils, it's my crystals, it's my intention setting, my meditation, my candles, like my sponge sprays, just the things that are natural gifts from the earth that I use to ground myself because
Uh-huh.
living in an anxiety filled world can get very exhausting and you kind of have to bring yourself out of it. It's almost like your brain separates, like it compartmentalizes. I don't want to say separates, it compartmentalizes things. And so it's hard to choose what you're going to focus on. So when I do have to focus on certain things, I have to really be grounded. And so if that means
Uh-huh.
I'm meditating, like I said, with my crystals or my oils, or even just like walking outside barefoot, just staring at the moon, it's all very nature connected to me. And so that's not
Right.
really something that is practiced by a lot of people that I've met, at least. Which I do have my certain friends that believe in it and they fully practice, which is great. But to other people, they're like, oh, well, that's just like hippie. That's woo woo. That's out there, you know?
Yeah. Right. And there's almost sort of this negative connotation with
Right.
it. But I think what's interesting like about what you said was that um at the bare bones of it, it really is medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And
it's
it's
really sort
natural.
of practicing medicine. Like it is remedies to sort of subvert what your state of mind or being physically was going to be. And I mean, if you think about it, all the things that you described are natural, like their oils and their botanicals and all of that. I mean, that's what medicine is.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine's made out of the earth, of nature.
Well,
Of
there is
course,
a difference between that kind of medicine, the kind that I like to use, and like big pharma. I'm not a huge fan of taking antibiotics or things, which of course I know that sometimes they are absolutely necessary, but to me it weakens my state of mind.
well, I mean, of course, some medicines are synthetic and not,
Mm-hmm.
they're created by people. But what I'm saying is, rather than look at the negative connotation of what it is, if you think of it as healing and medicine in the way that we have grown up it's not that different than taking a pill that was created from a plant, you know?
Right. And, there's a lot of tinctures out there, a lot of holistic natural remedies that can cure things that big pharma can cure. Just a reference, I've been reading this book called The Green Witch, which is like a complete guide to the natural magic of like herbs and flowers, essential oils, things like that. So you can literally go out into nature and find things from nature. Say someone has their own garden, like hydroponic garden, whatever. You
Uh-huh.
can pick certain herbs, certain vegetables, certain things like that to cure a cold. So have you heard of like things like fire cider?
No.
Okay, so you literally take it's like horseradish, jalapenos, like apple cider vinegar, honey, lemon, just a bunch of different ingredients. Like you put it in a mason jar, mix this stuff all together, bury it in your yard, and then wait for a month. Go
Why are you
undig
gonna
it.
bury it?
Just I mean, you don't have to. You can like put it in a dark space. It just has to like ferment really. But some people choose to bury it because they feel like the earth kind of adds more to it, if that makes sense.
Ferment? Are we talking about some alcohol?
Sort of, but not. It's not alcoholic.
Ooh.
So then when the month is up, you undig it or take it out of your little dark space that you put it in, and you strain it through a cheesecloth, and it can be taken as like a shot every day. You can use it as like salad dressing. You can put it in your tea, and it can help cure the common cold or cold symptoms.
Well, so but what the fuck do you do then when you're waiting with the
So no,
cold for the
most
month?
people, so like whenever cold and flu season comes up, that's when people will start making their fire cider just to prepare. So if
Oh,
they
they
start
make it in
feeling right,
preparation.
so if they start feeling the symptoms, they'll just start taking it. So things like that are really what I'm kind of practicing and kind of doing more research on. Have you heard of like making your own broom?
No. Do you mean to clean?
Sort of. It's more of like an energy sweep than like actually cleaning your house. So you go out into, your backyard, or if you live near the woods, you go out and collect different branches and you tie them together, bless it with your own intention, sprinkle cinnamon or whatever you want on it, your oils, and then you just kind of, go around your house and sweep, but you don't actually sweep, you just kind of sweep the air, and it's supposed to
No.
kind of cleanse the air and just bring about like a lot of positive energy. And then, you're supposed to hang it a couple feet off the floor just to kind of keep as like a little like talisman for good energy.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that's something. I mean, I bought
Well,
I bought one from Trader Joe's because it already had cinnamon in it, and I'm bougie, so. But
but so how much of this do you think personally is just sort of a placebo? Like it's sort of like doing the ritual puts you in a state of mind that makes you more inclined to feel happy, or it's sort of like a trigger for your brain to like flip a switch.
like, if you're going that far to call it a placebo, I wouldn't think that it would be a placebo anymore, because if it makes you feel better, it's working.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
Placebos are more of an experiment.
Well, okay. No, no, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. I just of course I mean it differently in the sense of like, birth control, there's a sugar pill in there somewhere. Like
Right.
but how much of it is, I don't want to say real.
I think that's relative, honestly, to the
Okay.
person and, what their beliefs are and what they're setting their intentions for. For me
Okay.
personally, I know
Yeah.
what works for me and I know what doesn't work for me. It's not going to be the same for everybody.
Because you have different needs. Is that sort
Right.
of, would
Right.
that be
Because,
correct?
everyone is different. Things are going to work for me that aren't going to work for you, and, vice versa.
So it's sort of like going back to like the medicine analogy. It's like some
Yeah.
people have migraines, some people have stomach issues, some people have, a bum knee.
And so for migraines, you can pour mustard seed into a pot of boiling water, let it boil, let it kind of mix in, and then you soak your feet in that for a good 30 minutes, and it's supposed to help relieve your migraine symptoms.
Huh.
hmm
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've
Well,
I've got a lot of books that are more holistic remedies for everyday ailments, and I've been doing so much research, and I've just learned so much. Like I feel like I'm a sponge right now, and it's all I want to learn about.
yeah. Well, damn, that mustard seed ass recipe would be really good for mom.
I know, because she does suffer from migraines, and
Well, you know
there's
how
pressure
many
points and things like that throughout your body that can also relieve symptoms. There's piercings that people have gotten that they say work.
Okay, so at this health class thingy that I took in college, they gave me this little band-aid with a silver ball on it, and you put it behind your ear, and it's supposed to like activate a pressure point. And I am so sensitive to it that they put it on, and like my knees buckled, and I like fell over and was like, "Oh, what is this?" Oh
Silver is
my
a
gosh,
big component in a lot of holistic medicine and healings,
what
like
is?
silver.
Silver. Oh,
Yeah.
well, yeah. Well, I don't know if it was the silver or just like I feel like my blood thinned and I just was like, what is this thing? I don't know. It
That's
was,
kind of cool though.
it's very intense for me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Things like that.
So since you are so sensitive to certain things like that, and like you remember me seeing spirits when I was younger, I know my son sees spirits. He's told me.
He does.
Yes, he. So when he was a baby, before he was really actually fully talking, he had picked
Uh-huh.
up a picture of our grandma. I never really had told him who she was because I didn't think it mattered at that point because he was so young. But he just pointed at her and was like, "That's grandma," and like
Bitch.
I had chills
Oh,
for days. And
I would put that thing up for adoption and move.
no,
That
it's
is.
amazing. It's a gift, you know? And like he would talk to people in his room when he was little. He would stare up at the ceiling and just like his eyes would be following something. Like I know that he's protected. I know that he is. I've seen several psychics. They've always told me that grandma is with us and she's protecting us. So I always feel so comforted in that at least. But yeah, so you see ghosts.
So when we were young, I remember going to bed one night and I woke up out of my sleep and I remember looking in the doorway because my
I
door
was
had been.
with you that night. We were sleeping in the
Okay.
same bed.
Were we? I don't
Yes.
remember. I mean, I
It
don't
was,
remember
you
that.
had your Scooby Doo bed set. That
I
house was
did
so
have a little
old.
spook bed there.
In that house, like I always felt like something was in there, and especially in that shed in the backyard, like the little house that was in the backyard.
Well, was that the house where like the alarm would go off
Yes, all the
randomly?
time. Brooms would fall
Yeah.
over, the alarm would
And
go off, the dog would always go crazy. Yeah,
yes, it was like how I described the penitentiary. It was like when you walked in the house,
you just
there was
felt it.
a wave of like dark energy. And I still remember this like from when I was a kid. And it wasn't one of those things where like, when you're a kid, you want to believe stuff. So you're like, oh, I felt it. Or
Oh
it
no,
was
I
really
remember
like,
being afraid of this thing, and I didn't want it to
right.
be real.
Well, and we were afraid of it. We were like, didn't want to go in the house. We were like,
I
but
didn't
it's,
want to sleep in my room.
yeah.
That's why I slept
Oh,
with you all the time.
which is probably why you're with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember we would always sleep with the TV on all night long. I
Uh-huh.
remember always waking up and it would be off. I don't know if that was dad, but
Yeah.
yeah, we both saw the same spirit. And
It was it was in the doorway
yep.
and it was standing there looking at us or me at the because I only I mean I don't I just I remember me looking at it.
Well, I remember you waking me up and I saw it and I got freaked out and I got up and I was like calling out for dad and it like walked down the hallway towards his room and then it was gone.
Well, so how I remember it though is that I remember looking at it being so scared and then running through it and going to dad's room. Is that not what happened?
I don't remember you getting up and running. I remember being the
No.
one to get up and watch it walk down the hall.
Well, you were older than me, so you would probably have a better memory of it than I did, but
And then
I
remember
still
we had gone to dad and told him what happened because we saw it several times. Things would happen and we finally were like to me what I saw was a man that was like in a soldier's outfit, but like
that's
old timey.
exactly what I saw.
Yeah, like old timey, like
Yes.
obviously very early war. I'm not sure, obviously what dates, but then he ended up finding out from one of the neighbors, I guess, that there was a man that was in the war that had died in that house.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I remember it being some sort of uniform
Hmm.
or like big jacket kind of thing, like that
And
kind of
he
look.
was wearing the hat. I remember the hat
And he was wearing
specifically.
a hat
Yeah.
and I remember him just looking angry.
Oh
He
yeah,
just
he was
looked
a very negative
so
entity.
angry. Yeah. I remember like looking in his face and it just looked like an angry man and it was I mean, as a kid obviously terrifying.
Terrifying.
So, I mean, I guess that we have always been sort of sensitive to things like that. And I still see, and have experiences today where like I'll see someone sort of in my periphery and it'll be sort of a very clear figure and then it sort of like dissipates as I look at it, which like could be a trick of the eye, whatever. But I've had really, really vivid experiences where, like in my old dorm room in college, it was an old nurses' ward from like 1930s or something. And I remember I was doing health, I was an RA and I was doing health and safety inspections with my coworker. And we go into this kid's room who lives in a single, so it's just his, it's like only his room. He's the only one in it. And I open the door and there's a woman like staring in my face. Like it almost looked like a hologram. Like you know how that look is very, it's like very transparent.
Like very fuzzy.
She was
Like
pretty
coming
clear, but
coming
like
in and
still
out of
fuzzy.
like reality almost.
But it was so quick. It was like a split second, and then as I like opened the door and took a step, she sort of like, the best way I can describe it is like evaporated. I don't really know how else to describe it, but it looked like a hologram of a woman. And
Ugh.
it was basically just her face that I could really see because it was like dead square with mine. And I was like, "Oh, Rocco, my coworker." I was like, I just saw a woman. And he like started looking around like for a person, and I was like, "Well, I don't really know how to explain this. I don't know what this is."
Did he
Um,
believe you, or did he think that you were like,
I had talked to him and all my friends about like seeing people for a long time, so they kind of knew like what that was. Like when I was like, "Oh, I just saw someone," they'd be like, they wouldn't be shocked. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, okay, like we know what that means." Even to the point where I was staying in mom's house and it was alone, and I
oh,
remember
mom's house, our house in Connecticut?
in Connecticut,
Oh,
yeah.
that house had a lot of energy in it too.
Well, which is funny because it was a
It was
brand new,
brand new. I know. But so
but
I'm wondering if there was something that stood there before that house was built.
I don't know.
Because
I
you
really,
remember across the street there were those two old houses that they eventually tore down, like they were
yeah.
condemned.
Well, to the point though that like speaking of like new buildings versus old buildings, I lived in that nurses ward dorm room for like 2 years and would see people all the time.
Did you
And
think that they were students, or could you differentiate?
no, because it wasn't like, again, it's not really like seeing a full person. It's sort of like it's like the shadow body of a person, or the, you know, when you see someone very quickly sort of like dart around a corner, or like they're peeking over the corner and then they like move their head.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's sort of like that. So I would see people all the time in this old building, and then I moved to a new dorm that had just been built. And I lived there for a year and I never saw a single person. And then I moved to an older Brooklyn apartment this past summer, and I've seen people here. So I don't know what that is exactly. But anyway, back I was at mom's house and I was alone and I was in the kitchen, and the way it was set up was it was sort of like a line. From the kitchen you could walk like straight into the living room. It was like an open walkway kind of thing. And so I was standing like by the counter and I had this experience, you know, this kind of thing where I see somebody kind of in the corner of my eye, or, you know, in my periphery, and they're sitting on the couch. And this was a little bit more vivid than a lot of the other ones. It was very clearly like a figure sitting down on the couch.
Was it a female figure?
I don't know. I couldn't tell.
Because I
It,
always felt a female energy in that house.
I did see it was a lot of times it was like a feminine kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
This one I really couldn't tell. It was just more so like all black, and then no one, and of course no one was there. And later, mom sat down in the spot that the person was in and was like, "Oh, it's really cold right here." In that same maybe couple day, or maybe even that night, it might have been, I was in bed and I had just turned out my lights. Like I know this wasn't like sleep paralysis or like a dream or anything, because I had just switched the lights off to go to bed, and I heard a noise and was like, I kind of felt like there was something in the room, and I felt somebody, because my bed is like a platform bed, so it's kind of on the ground. It's on like
Yeah, very low
a
profile.
yeah, it's not like a raised bed, so you can it's like below knee level basically, and I felt the pressure and the indentations of somebody foot by foot stepping onto my bed. One foot, and then sort of like the mashing down of the mattress, and then the other foot.
Oh God. See, and that happened at my ex-boyfriend's house. I had told this story previously on another podcast, but basically, just to make a long story short, there was a lot of energy in that house too. And he had called
Mhm.
me in the middle of the night after I left and was like, "Did you come back over?" And I was like, "No, I didn't. I'm sleeping. Like, what do you need?" And
Yeah.
he said that somebody was on his bed, like pushing on, like into his chest. And so I slept
Ugh.
with the lights on for months. And then it happened when I was at his house. We had gone to see a movie, and his parents were out of town at this point. He always thought it was like his sister Stephanie messing with him or turning the lights on. But then whenever I was there, all three of them, like his mom, his dad, and his sister, were all out of town. And we had just gotten back from the movies. And I was going to stay the night because he was so scared to be by himself. And so we were getting ready to lay down to go to bed. Like we were just laying there talking, whatever. And then all of a sudden, it was like the energy in the room changed. Everything got so loud. Like I could hear his fan, like the ceiling fan, just get so loud.
Uh-huh.
And it felt the same thing. The bed, it felt like somebody had sat on it and like pushed it way down. And
Mm.
so he like grabbed me and like we rolled off the bed together. And there was like blue sparks coming out of the socket in his room.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was wild.
That is so well. I mean, earlier you were like, well, what was I like as a kid? I remember you coming home as a teenager with stories like that. Like you would sleep over at this friend's house and you got like water bottles would like fly across the
Okay,
room and
so
like,
that was the first time I ever fucked with the Ouija board. I will never do that again. Yeah, I stayed the
oh,
night at
I
a
didn't know
friend's
you were doing
house. Yes, and this is, people don't believe this story, and I honestly, it doesn't sound believable to me, but this is 100% the truth. We had got found a Ouija board. I think it was like her mom's or something. We went into her bathroom. There was a can of Mountain Dew sitting up on the counter. We were doing the Ouija board trying to contact, I can't even remember, one of her like dead family members. And we
uh-huh.
were just like, if anyone's here, like, please let us know, show us a sign. Nothing happened. We asked it two more times. The third time, she felt somebody grab her hair. She felt somebody scratch her, and that can of Mountain Dew flew off the counter.
Whoa.
And so
Yeah.
we ended up like walking down the street with the Ouija board, threw it in the church parking lot because we were like, this thing needs Jesus, you know. And then
Oh
the
my
next
gosh.
morning woke up to it being in her front yard.
No.
Dead serious. Like I wish I was lying.
What? Okay,
Yeah.
that is like the
And then I swear to God, the next day I couldn't stop talking with a country accent. It was like I got possessed. Like I couldn't stop. And it was so annoying to me. And I was just like, God, I just remember like laying in bed that night, just praying. I was like, I will never do this again. I'm so sorry. Yeah, that one was
that's
wild.
crazy.
And
You
I feel things here in my house here. I do fully believe there is a Chinese woman that lives in this house.
I mean that is that the specificity
Yeah. So this
is astounding.
apologize mom and dad ahead of time, but I did do shrooms in this house. I got very sick at the end of it. So I was going down to the bathroom to go like purge, obviously. And
Okay.
as I was walking to the bathroom, I felt just like 15 different people lined up waiting to talk to me. And I was just like, I can't, I gotta go throw up right now. Made it to the bathroom, was like crawling to the toilet, and this Chinese woman was holding my hair back while I
That
was
is
throwing up.
that is so you told me that before and it is so disturbing to me the
So
idea of because they say that
psychedelics thin the veil.
yeah and that you sort of can become like a portal
Yep.
for like energy
Well,
or spirit.
you're so much more open. All of your chakras are aligned. They're all open when you do psychedelics like that.
Yeah.
And you know, you tap into a different part of your brain that you don't use all the time. So of course things are heightened, your senses are heightened. You know, your ability to sense things, you know, of the other world, I feel like is potentially like, especially if you're a sensitive person like I am, you're at a greater risk of
Yeah.
things like that happening, which
Yeah.
it's not always a negative experience, but not really ever one that I want to have again. So,
Yeah. I mean, don't do drugs, kids.
well, and I don't even view psychedelics as drugs because they're from the earth, you know?
Well, yeah, but so is ayahuasca, and that makes people shit themselves. So
Well, it makes them violently throw up too, but it's supposed to be a very spiritual experience.
it is. You're right. I mean, it has apparently like cured people's depression
Yeah.
and opened it.
Well, and you
You know.
know, if you microdose shrooms, that can also cure anxiety and depression.
But now, see, I'm the reason that I've never done drugs, and I like literally have not. I've never even smoked weed. Like I've done nothing. I literally haven't. I would just say like what I did, but I've never. Is because I'm very afraid that I will feel something that I think is better than everyday reality, and then I'll be sort of always striving to feel that again, and that I'll be so underwhelmed now by sort of everyday life, and so I make it a point to like try to get to that feeling by myself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, which is totally fine. A lot of people can get to that same feeling that people, who smoke weed get to by smoking weed. Like people meditate and they're like, "Oh, I feel just as high as if I just smoked a joint."
But I mean, it is when you did shrooms for instance,
Hmm.
was it a feeling of like like ultimate euphoria or like
Honestly, no, it was not. I don't want to say it was a negative experience, but it wasn't really a positive experience. I was very emotional through the whole trip, I guess.
yeah.
I just had to keep grounding myself and just being like, okay, you're here, you're safe, you're in the living room. This is where you are. Like it's September, whatever, 2000, whatever. Like I just had to keep reminding myself that I was
Oh
okay.
yeah.
So
You
that's
had sort of like
exhausting in itself. And so that's not a positive experience to me. And then just like I was
yeah.
so emotional, it was like everything opened up for me and I was just able to release it, which, that part can be positive, but if you're doing it with another person, that can potentially ruin their experience because they don't want to deal with an emotional mess. And so
So you should do it alone.
I honestly, I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't know. Everybody has their own experience with it. I just know what I went through, and it's not something I ever really want to do again. So, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I had the experience. And, like people want to judge me for trying it. It's literally from the earth.
No, I mean I don't think anyone should. Adults try things, okay?
Right.
Like I think as long as it doesn't become a problem, you can experiment and see different ways to live. I
Right.
mean,
I mean, I don't do drugs either. It's not
yeah.
anything I'm interested in. Uh, I've lost a lot of people to drugs, and so that's like I said, it's just not something that I'm interested in. And
Well, I think it blocks you. It inhibits your ability to like see yourself, I think, and be like at peace and okay with yourself. And I think that it can really get in the way of a lot of people's success, not even just in that they're distracted and doing drugs all the time, but I think that you're not clear-minded, you're not like you're saying grounded. So how can you possibly give the pinnacle of who you are
right,
when there's like that other force that's sort of like taking you away from it, or um and it is sort of like in because I work in a lot of clubs, and I mean, this is my issue, is that I like to be alone a lot, and when I'm in social situations where I have to make conversation and come up with things to talk about very quickly with strangers and talk to 40 people in a room that night, you know like a drink or two will always help me sort of like forget about my self-consciousness, or will help me like loosen up and be like, it's fine, it doesn't matter, like whatever you say is going to be fine, you can, even if it's awkward, who cares. It sort of opens me up to that. But I do think at the same time that they're not always getting the truth. They're not always getting like,
they're not getting the real version of you,
yeah, they're getting sort of one that is um
medicated in a way,
yeah, no, right, and then one that is in a way enhanced and fabricated from the drug, which in this case would be alcohol.
outside substances. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. The only things that I would ever consider would be things from the earth, and I know that they say like cocaine has things from the earth, but I don't trust that.
they
Um,
also mix it with baby laxatives, so
and
listen,
fentanyl. A lot of coke is now cut with fentanyl, which is not okay. That's
that's
what is
something
killing
really
people.
that is I think I remember reading or an article or seeing a news story about this, that fentanyl is the new leading
It is.
cause
Yeah,
of death
it is.
and like destruction among the drug community.
Yeah, I've just lost
Like
too many people to it to even be interested.
I don't get it. I mean, people who every day will wake up and be like, got to do math, or like, that is that is like something that I will just never. And not that I'm like judging it, because I don't know what it's like, but I never will
It's just not
understand.
relatable. Yeah.
No, and a lot of times. it's so there's another famous drag queen named Katya, who I think you know
Yeah.
about,
Mm-hmm.
who was a meth addict previously, and the way that they described it was, I just wanted to get stuff done. I just wanted to like have a ton of energy and be peppy and run all my errands and feel good and blah blah. Blah. And then she said the way that I stopped doing it was that I realized you can't borrow energy from next week.
That's true. And, a lot of people are addicted to Adderall because of that very same reason. Like they just feel like they're not going to get anything accomplished if they don't have this Adderall rushing through their system. But you
Yeah,
know what? You can seriously get the same effect from meditation if you try hard enough.
or just cope.
Yeah,
Like
that too. Just cope. But
like
like, meditation is a form of coping.
have a
It is a coping
strong
mechanism.
have a strong cup of coffee and get the fuck off the couch. Like leave
Coffee
your
makes me feel
house.
like a crackhead. So,
I I have it every day. If
yeah.
it's an addiction, sure,
Well, I
I'll
mean,
take it.
everybody in a sense is addicted to something, whether it be drugs, whether it be reading, whether it be running, as long as the things that you are addicted to are serving you in a healthy way,
Yeah,
then I don't think that there's a real issue. It's when it starts to become who you are versus what you do is when the real issue arises,
yeah,
which unfortunately is what happens with a lot of people that abuse drugs. It
yeah,
becomes who they
absolutely.
are instead of what they do.
Well, that's sort of like I think the real overarching, talk about metaphysics. Like you have to eventually come to terms and understand who you are and what your identity is, and it can't be drug addict, or your personality and who you are can't be gay or straight. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you have to get past that and the sort of physical things in order to figure out who you are and what you're doing here, and the purpose that you serve. And I mean, it's maybe there is no purpose. Maybe we're just like, you know ants on a globe, like trying to make the best of things. But even still, maybe that's the purpose. Maybe it's learning and exploring and having relationships and eating good food and dancing and colors and books and learn education and struggles and all of that. But like you can't, like I said, you can't cloud it and distort it with all of these other factors that we're inundated with,
Yeah, I agree.
which I think is really, I'm really happy that you have found something that I think is helping you to do that. I think that that's why you're so attracted to this, is because you are finally not going off of like, well, I'm a Christian and I'm a woman and I'm from Texas, and it has nothing to do with that stuff anymore. It's more of your emotional and spiritual being.
Yeah, and honestly, it's like a relief to be able to live my life this way. So
Hmm.
it's been a positive experience for me, and I'm going to continue to be this way because it feels as close to who I am as anything else ever has.
Well,
So
I mean, that is like more power to you, because if you can find that and if you can understand what that is and then harness it, I mean, that's
the
that's like
possibilities are endless,
that's
honestly.
like the whole point.
Well, I know that I am very physically drained after this conversation, which isn't a
I
bad thing.
know.
We just covered a lot. So, do you want to tell listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at It's Muffy Queen, at ITS Muffy Queen. That is my drag page, and where all of I post my looks and my events that are coming up in New York City. And also, I use my Twitter as sort of a therapeutic spewing of comedic acknowledgement of current events and society. So if you want to be entertained by that,
Which I
that
recommend.
that's an option.
Are you also It's Muffy Queen on Twitter?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I love you, brother. I hope you have a good night, and
I love you too.
let's do this again soon. I love having you on.
Yeah, have me on anytime. We can talk about anything.
Yeah, I definitely want to cover more of your drag
Oh
background and
God.
history once they get more established. So,
Whew,
guys,
that's a journey. So
yeah,
get ready.
stay tuned, listeners. We love you. Thank you for listening to the Bewitching Hour podcast. Again, I'm your host, Kat, and you can follow me on Instagram at Kat Alexander with 2 R's. You can follow the Bewitching Hours Instagram at Bewitching Podcast. And please, don't forget to rate me 5 stars and leave a nice review. In perfect love and perfect trust, until next time.
She was just a wish. She was just a wish. And her memory is all that is left of her now. Like